Good Tuesday to you, everybody in Com 710. Welcome to week, boom, bam, 13. Is that 13? Oh, yeah, or 13 with a thumb if you live in Europe. How's everybody doing? Almost to the end. Hang in there. You're doing great. Really only 2 more weeks of work because that last week, I'm going to give you work during, there's no readings or discussion board during that last week. And you get a chance to finish your stuff. Okay. All right. So a couple of things coming up before we get into the readings from last week. First things first. Who do we have here? Let's see. Rocky Mountain National Park. Beautiful place. If you get a chance to get out to Colorado, I highly, highly recommend it. All right. That's better now. Sufficiently caffeinated. Okay, so your papers, they are coming up by way of due. I've asked you to turn them in on the 22nd. All right. Some of you are, saying, oh, I've got a little wiggle room. I do, but just a teeny weeny bit. What I'll be doing is I'll be grading them during that last week of class and giving you some feedback. And this gives me, really the time and space to give you meaningful feedback on the work. All right. And that's why we split it into two. When you do the first part and then you do the second part. And again, you're probably getting sick and tired of me saying this, but I want everybody to understand what we're doing here. If you make the changes that I pointed out in part one, or some of you have connected with me and we discussed, if you make the changes in part one, after you add, the second bit, so it's one paper, and then you don't do those things again, I go back and change the grade on that first part, on that first paper. Okay, excuse me. And it's allergy season for me, so if I have to reach for a tissue or cough or clear my throat, I beg your patience here. Okay. Because writing is a developmental process, and we're here to help each other develop as communicators, and in particular as writers, because in our business, this is how most people are going to meet you. All right. Okay. So let's take a look at the readings. Say a little bit about the readings for this week. We're shifting our focus back to Middle East. Excuse me. And so you've got a series of articles to download in the course content folder, and then questions that go with them. And we're going to be, because we looked a little bit at Israel, and now we're going to be pushing over into Saudi Arabia. So I hope you'll find some interesting stuff there, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. Going back to last week, all right, week 12, we're going to look at the questions and answers here in just a second. What I'm trying to do, what I'm asking you to do, excuse me, as we have in other weeks, is I want you, whatever the topic is, whether it's religion, and media in the Middle East, or in the case of Vernon in East Africa, condition yourself. Learn to be critical of the sources. Not criticism, but to be critical. Undergo, when you pick up a source, subject it to critical analysis. A good source, an article, a book, will have the equivalent of an abstract, for an article, abstract's an abstract, but for a book, the introduction, in which, what the issue is, what the data is, how the data is handled, methodology, and the big picture conclusions. Those things should be laid out for you. And when you write, be kind to your writers. Give them that information. All right. So when you pick up a source, be it an article or a book, look for that. If the author is unsure in terms of execution, this is not a strong source, and you don't want to use sources that are not methodologically sound, research sound, written well. You don't want to put this in your stuff. You don't want to build your arguments on flimsy arguments. So that's got to go. I get it. As PhD students, you're getting a lot thrown at you by way of authors, their information, their major theories, sort of overarching concepts. You've got a lot to stuff in your head, right? But right up towards the top of what you're aiming to do by way of developing skill sets is that. That is your critical research skills, being able to identify a well-done source as opposed to a not so well-done source. So looking back at the questions from last week, this is what we're doing with Vernon, is this exercise again, and you being critical of what you read and specifically of certain sections of a work. When I pick up a work, whether it's an article or a book, I sort of skim, I read the abstract or I skim the introduction to get a sense, a sort of mental contextualization as to what's going on here. I go straight to the methodology section, absolutely all the time, because depending on the sample size, depending on the methodology employed, depending on the data that's pulled out, depending on how the data is being handled, depending on what the author says they're going to do with the data, you just learn right off the bat that this is probably going to work or this is not going to work. Okay. Now, for yourself as researchers, beyond developing those sharp skills to recognize good sources, for yourself as a researcher, look for the gaps in the material that you read. Future studies. Look at the go to the section in which they say things for future studies or limitations of the study. Look for the gap. So a lot of folks, I speak with people all throughout the semester, and they say, I just don't know what to do. Okay, well, start with the general area that interests you. Start reading what's been written and published, and then start looking for things that haven't been covered, either by the admission of the author. This is what could be covered in the future, or this is what I didn't get around to, or what you can see. And if it's not a gap, if you take issue with an argument or a conclusion, your aim should be, aim to be a correct contrarian. Okay, now this is going to take some practice. Don't be a noisy gong. Don't be a contrarian to be a contrarian, St. Paul. Okay? You have to be open to the possibility that you could be an incorrect contrarian, right? Watch for your own confirmation bias. Watch for your own blind spots. But if you genuinely find, in addition to reading, well, this is what could be done in the future, or this is what this study didn't do, if you genuinely find whoa, hey, you got this wrong, back up, do a little research around why it is you feel that this author got this wrong. What was it? Was it methodology? Was it sources? Was it they overstretched their conclusions from how they treated the data? What? And read up on the best practices to do those things, and then come back and say, yeah, no, they got this wrong. Okay, so these are the major gaps that you're looking for as a researcher that you can step into, and then you make an important contribution to whatever it is that interests you. Okay, let's take a look at the questions from last week and some of your answers. So question number 1, briefly summarize Vernon's methodology. This is chapter 4. In doing so, pay particular attention to the sources she cites in constructing and justifying her proposed methodology. Okay, and I'm sorry. I am very sorry. I'm just like, okay. Shonda, you went first. Let's take you first. Vernon used a qualitative method to conduct her research. Vernon stated this study utilized qualitative research design as an instrumental case study according to Creswell. And I like that you cite Creswell, an important book, not the easiest book to get through in some places. So good job there. The case study approach allows the researcher to delve deeply into the phenomenon under studying within a selected context. Vernon can justify the quality of her research and how she conducts her study. Yes, I would have used, the same method, qualitative, that she did. Okay, excellent answer. Because she's dealing, because she's dealing with historical and physical artifacts and archival records. And yes, you're absolutely right here again. Good answer on 2 counts. Qualitative methodology is an excellent way to deal with physical, records, physical artifacts, and archival records. Okay, good job. Billy, let's see what you have here. In chapter 4, Vernon used a qualitative research method design in the form of an instrumental case study. I may be off in my response, but I don't think you are. However, I took the chapter as Vernon's explaining what qualitative research method was more than explaining how it related or was used in her research. Okay, and that is an excellent observation, Billy. Now, if you've given me papers, you probably know this already, but I, as a reader, I discourage the writer, and I don't do this myself, explaining what the methodology is. Unless your paper focuses on qualitative methodology, I don't feel that you need to explain qualitative methodology. Now, if, say, you're doing historical, critical, or content analysis, then okay, you've got to discuss the components of the historical critical analysis as they pertain to your study, or the components of content analysis as it pertains to the study. But you don't have to go into an explanation of content analysis. I mean, maybe a paragraph, no more, as to why this methodology is appropriate for your research. That's it. I make that just, I much prefer just to get to the point. Okay, it's sort of like the difference between, explaining how to play football and let's just play football. All right, I don't know, sports analogy, and it's the spring. Where does that come from? I got no idea. Okay, question number 2. Consider the research questions Vernon lists in chapter 5, and there's a lot of them. Select one of these RQs and briefly summarize Vernon's answer. Doing so, evaluate Vernon's answer, noting whether she answered the RQ adequately. Okay, Derek. Let's see, what factors contributed to the SDA Church's engagement in the use of religious radio broadcast to fulfill her stated global mission within the Tanzanian Union Mission? Okay, so that's the RQ. Vernon's findings reveal 4 factors contributing to the SDA Church's use of radio to fulfill the stated mission. Number 1, the degree of freedom prevalent in the country. Okay, good. Number 2, the number of SDA members within the population. Right, that's important. Number 3, the ability of the local church organizations to fund its own initiatives. Okay, good. And number 4, the availability of personnel to follow up. Okay, and then you write, Derek, I feel that the 4 factors identified by Vernon adequately address her question. Okay, factors 2 through 4 are easily quantifiable. There's an identifiable number of FDA members in the population, et cetera, et cetera. But you make an interesting point here at the end. The degree of freedom prevalent in the country, I felt, needed more explanation. The author states that there is relative freedom of the press, but what does that mean? Excellent. Now, what does relative mean? It's like virtually spotless. What does that mean? Relative to what standard? Right. Relative to, say, Uganda under Idi Amin. I mean, not the same time frame, I understand, but you know what I mean. Okay, the dictator, relative to what? I understand how freedom of the press would play a role in the decision to broadcast in Tanzania, but I feel the author needed to explain the meaning. All right, that's a good. See, that's exactly what we want to do, Derek. Well done. When you read this, don't just go, "Oh yeah, relative." That's press freedom, relatively free. Okay, you go, okay, yeah, like relative to what? How do you quantify that? Very good. Okay, question number 3 in chapter 6, Vernon discusses the limitations of her study. Given these limitations, consider briefly discuss possible research designs. What I mean by this is projects. What would you do that could fill in for or overcome Vernon's noted limitations? Okay, Valeria. In chapter 6, Vernon discussed the limitations of her study. Given these limitations, possible research designs that could be considered to fill in or overcome her no limitations are ethnographic research designs, mixed methods. I like this, okay? Ethnographic research designs will allow the researcher to obtain a holistic picture of the subject of study, observing and interviewing them, with emphasis on portraying the everyday experiences of individuals by observing and interviewing them and relevant others. And this is from Creswell. Okay. Mixed method approach would entail a combination of quantitative closed-end questions and qualitative open-end research questions. Excellent. And this is exactly how I want you to start, gearing your mind. When you read this, like limitations, you go, oh, well, hey, if I could follow up on this, I could unpack this, and this is how I would do it. Okay. There you're finding the gap. Good job. Good answer. Okay. Question number 4. After completing Vernon's book, what, in your opinion, is at least one future area of research that would either complement or fill in topics that Vernon did not cover in her work. Okay, so this is, again, what do you think might go in there? Okay, Brenda, I like what you're up to here. One area of focus that would be very useful is to look at social media usage among women in Tanzania in SDA missions outreach. Okay, and this is, and there are a number of you that touched on this, by the way, so this wasn't just you, Brenda, but absolutely, completely right. The study was published in 2011. The advancement of internet social media among different populations in Africa is a huge area. I think we're just missing an A of research interest. Examining how internet access use of social media by SDA Church to research, in particular female population, would be an area of interest to study. Perfect. You know, I sat on someone's dissertation, and they did a study. He was from Ghana, and he did a study of the use of the social media app WhatsApp, and how it was changing the understanding about and beliefs around intercessory prayer. You know, I'm going to pray for you for such and such, or please pray for me for such and such. Good answer. Now, see, this is what you do. This is how you find your way. This is how you sort of feel your way to, you know, what's my vocation? What am I meaning to address as a communicator? You know, God has put us all here for a reason. Has put you in this program for a reason. So find the area that interests you. Start reading widely in that area, and then start looking at things that didn't get covered, at things that weren't covered well, of limitations, things that couldn't be covered, and things that might be covered. There you'll find the gaps. There you're going to find the purpose for what you might do. Okay? All right, everybody. Good job this week. Keep at those papers. Again, I'm in my office, 6 hours a week, and, you can always make an appointment with me, and we can do that. Okay? So, keep plugging away. You're going to do great. And remember, I'm thinking about you. For those of you that have been having some difficulty, and you know who you are, thank you for reaching out and letting me know. And so remember that I am praying for you, and you, in particular. Okay. God bless to everyone, and I'll see you on Blackboard. Bye-bye.